This episode is sponsored by The Alcohol Experiment, a free 30-day challenge designed to interrupt your patterns, give you control, restore your health, and put you back in touch with the version of you who doesn't need alcohol to cope, relax, or enjoy life. More than 220,000 people have already tried The Alcohol Experiment for themselves and have seen improved sleep, increased happiness, reduced anxiety, and so much more. Join thousands in this inspiring, hopeful, and exciting program where you examine your beliefs and reconnect with the best version of you without ever feeling like you're missing out. Start today for free at alcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. I'm super excited about my guest today. I have on Robin from Workit Health, which is an organization that has just done incredible things. And Robin, thanks so much for joining and being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I'm really excited to be here and just have this midday talk. It's really an eye of the storm for me, so very much appreciate it.
So awesome. So let's do kind of what I always do, which is like go way back to the beginning, in your journey and your story, way back when you're as a kid, even your first drink, like where did it all start for you?
Well, Annie, where didn't it start? Let's see, like how far back do we go? But so like a lot of other people in recovery, I come from a long line and of people who have struggled with substance use disorders, and specifically for us, really alcohol use disorder. So some people call it alcoholism, some people call it alcohol use disorder, some people call it drinking too much, like whatever, it doesn't really matter. And, I think sometimes in healthcare, we spend way too long pontificating on the vocabulary, while also like limiting the vocabulary that we have. So I come from a long line of people that struggled with drinking specifically, and probably a lot of drugs and other things got thrown in there, but really the horror stories are surround alcohol. So from a really young age, I was always aware of it. We always had 2 recycling bins, one for like can paper and one for wine bottles. Still do have 3, 4 at home, not my home. I've just been surrounded by alcohol my entire life. And I always thought I never understood that it changed behavior as a young kid, right? Like I never really understood what it did. I just thought it was like every other drink, like dad likes seltzer, dad likes beer kind of thing. And until one day, so that was my exposure. And then one day when I was in 6th grade, I came home, and we are from Canada originally, but grew up in Florida for grade school and above. And I came home, and my mother was on the couch and she was crying, and my only relative from Canada that lived close to us in Florida was my grandfather. And she was like, your grandfather was sick. He was very, very sick and he died. And I was like, what do you mean? Sick with what? Sick with the cold? Sick with the fever? And she just kept saying he was very, very sick. Mm-hmm. And he ended up killing himself and my cousin Jeffrey and his wife, who wasn't my grandmother, but my step-grandmother, Marcia. And it was this horrific event. So at home, he was sick and then he left, right? This really euphemistic way of talking about it. And at school, everybody came in with newspapers. It was all over the news. It was all over, like down to Miami, up to Toronto. It was just all over everywhere. But that was really my first exposure to alcoholism and its destructive effects. So quickly after that, I don't know if this is the rebel archetype or what, but that plus a series of just traumatizing experiences in 6th and 7th grade. I had my first drink around that time. And I remember feeling as though I had left the planet of Earth and ascended to the heavens, when I imbibed spirits for the first time. I mean, it was just like, this is the best and I want more and more and more. And the story is what I hear all the time, right? Like it made me feel comfortable and made me feel safe. It made me feel excited and penetrated boredom, and penetrated though deeply a lot of discomfort for me and a lot of just dissatisfaction with life as it was. So that was 6th grade, 7th grade. Quickly, alcohol is hard to come by, at least the quantity of alcohol that I desired is hard to come by. So quickly I started messing with food. So a big part of my story is also having an eating disorder. And I went from being to dieting, to starving, to being anorexic, to flipping to bulimia when that anorexia was sort of breaking down, to flipping back again, and struggled with this crazy maze of alcohol, anorexia, bulimia all through high school. And my first recovery center was when I went to boarding school in Spain, and I had to fly home on my 18th birthday to go to an inpatient rehab center in South Florida called Renfrew. And there has since been an HBO documentary on Renfrew because it was a terrifying place. And so that set me up to think about treatment. And, fast forward 8 years later, I created Workit Health, in my late 20s. But yeah, that's pretty much my story.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I didn't get in recovery then, by the way. I relapsed for the next 4 years. And then finally it was a combination of things that got me into recovery, which we can talk about, but yeah.
Did the food do for you what the alcohol did?
Not as successfully, but it's trade-offs. Food was accessible and alcohol was inaccessible, but alcohol was more effective. So actually what really took me down was when I got into college, there was so much more access to alcohol. Like, I went to University of Michigan, and any of the different party stores, they didn't really accept ID, or they accepted my really fake ID. And I could just buy as much alcohol as I wanted. And suffice to say, I dropped out, and then I was expelled, and then I begged to come back. Like, it was just this just big dramatic affair. I ended up graduating by the skin of my teeth, but it was, that took me down really fast. So alcohol got me there a lot quicker, but it brought me down faster.
And then what were some of the moments when you were just like, okay, something's got to change?
I always had this big flashing billboard of Papa, my grandfather, in my head. Mm-hmm. So when I started drinking really heavily, especially in college, and started, stumbling into class, teachers started calling me out, going to my econ exam with wine teeth, and someone confronted me, I always knew what was to come. And I thought of it I'm a really practical person. I tend to be really logical. So I thought of this, I remember thinking of it in a really practical way, saying, this is my end, right? Like, begin with the end in mind. But this is my end. This is where I'm going. I'm going to speed up my trip to get there because I know it's a painful process. It's a strange, inverted, weird thought, but I remember drinking really hard and thinking I might as well just go all out now, because that's the way it's going to end for me. And I don't want to drag this out until I'm 65,
That is fascinating. That's really, really interesting. I actually did we kind of had a virtual event last week where there was like 8,000 people on. And one of the questions that I was posing, because it was true for me, and it was one of those things that you think, well, this is true for me, but it wasn't real clear. And I don't know if this is true for other people, but one of the questions that I posed is like, for me, I felt like, okay, there's going to be some, like, I will fix this. Like, I will save myself. Like, at some point, like, there is some future version of me that is going to come in and figure this out. Like, I'm certain of that. And but I'm waiting for things to what? Just get worse. Like, how, like, and so you're almost saying, yeah, that's true. And I knew that would happen, but I had to push the gas pedal. I had to accelerate it in order to kind of bring that.
I was like, I have to appreciate this while I still have it. Like, someone is going to take this away from me. I think also I was right after rehab for the first time, right? So I was 18, and then I started drinking every single night. And I was a daily drinker. I was a morning drinker. I was a middle of the night drinker. Like, I truly was around the clock drinking. I wasn't, a lot of people don't have that experience. They're more, but I would say most people don't have that experience, in fairness, but I did. I definitely was just all the time. And so I remember thinking, I'm not going to be able to get away with this forever. Like, the other shoe is going to drop, and I'm going to enjoy this now. I'm going to really go all out now. It was such a sick thought, because at the same time, I was so exhausted, and my skin was gray, and my hair, I had chopped it off in a blackout and thrown it at someone. I wasn't at my peak performance, and I wasn't at my peak happiness. And still, Russell Brand says this. He actually says this thing, and I don't remember where he said it, otherwise I'd look it up. But he said this thing where he looked back at himself in the midst of his using, and he was like on a couch in a grimy room, and he was like shooting up. And only somebody that was in recovery and that truly had been there could understand the longing for that, mess. And that, I guess it's a self-esteem projection, or however you want to go into that, whatever door, psychology or whatever. But it was this weird masochist feeling of, let's just push this really hard. I'm in pain, and I'm just going to be in so much pain. And I don't want anybody to take away this ability that I have right now. So that's what it was. And there was that thought, but then there was, and this didn't go on forever and ever. By the time I was 21, I landed in another rehab center in Arizona, and in Arizona still, it was 30 days later, and it was incredibly expensive. I mean, everybody knew it was so expensive. Everybody in Process Group talked about it being so expensive. This is before insurance covered the cost of treatment, which really, they don't really cover the cost of a lot of treatment. And so I remember thinking, I was laying on the lawn with my friend Emily, and I remember saying, you know what, I'm going to drink when I get out, like Winston Churchill. And she was like, what are you talking about? Your whole life has blown up. And I was like, I'm just going to have, he called it a drab, but I'm just going to have a teeny little bit every day. That's all I'm going to do. And it's such a strange thing. You can hold two thoughts in your head. I'm a complete alcoholic. I can never stop. This is going to run me into the ground via suicide, manic depression, etc. And I can control it completely. And I'm only going to have a little, I think that's why it's so hard to treat, and why it's so hard to fix, right? Or in oneself, or not fix, but so hard to ameliorate in any sort of way, is because you have all of these paradoxes that you're holding.
Yeah. All of this cognitive dissonance, and both things can feel equally true. And then sometimes they don't, but then it's wild. I would make myself selfie videos because I'd have like these cravings that were so intense, and I'd be like, there's nothing worse than this. And then I'd give in, and I'd make myself a video. There's one at like some club. I'm in the bathroom, and it's like, Annie, this is worse. Like, remember that feeling this is worse, because I just feel so disconnected. And it was.
That's incredible. Do you still have them?
Yeah.
You could do
some of them. There's a lot of them that I don't.
MFA thesis on that. But that's cool. Wow.
So then, something finally clicked. So how did that go?
Annie, it was a long, slow click, but it was a multi-year click. I think, well, what happened really, I can actually pinpoint when I stopped drinking. It was this time that I was in rehab. I was in aftercare. This is like month 9. I was told that I could go back to university at like month 2, and then 3, and then 4. And then I was like, you're living in California now. You are a resident. I was never allowed to go home. So it was month 9.
And how did they judge that? Just out of curiosity, like,
I was 21. So really rebellious, right? I was in a traditional rehab center where you had to go to group every single day.
And did you choose to go there, or?
I did not want to go. It was between there and not like having any money anymore, and being out on my own. And I didn't want to go out on my own. So my parents were like, you can either, get straight A's in school, you can go back to being a normal kid, or you can go to California and get help. And so I chose, and then I didn't choose. Like, I was there, but I wasn't totally willing. It's that weird thing that I turned my keys one day, and 4 days later, I was resentful at everybody else for keeping me there, but I had agreed to go. So it was just this messy relationship that I had. I thought I agreed to the 30-day program plus a month of follow-up, but they, because I don't really know why they won't let you leave until the director says you're ready. And so month 3, month 4, month 5, I was there for 9 months. And then finally I was like, I can't do this anymore. But it's one of those, I don't know. I guess I could have left at any time, but I wasn't an adult yet. My parents were still funding me. So I was just kind of like, they're really mad at me. But so I went home to Colorado, I went home to Colorado to visit my parents, and it was over Christmas. And like my dad was like, I'm so proud of you for staying sober. You've been sober, I think at the time, for like 90 days or something. He was like, I'm so proud of you. You're on your way. Like, it's so great. I was like, yeah, I am sober. I'm awesome. And then my parents decided to go out that night for dinner, which is sort of a strange thing, but, and so leaving me with my two little sisters. And as soon as the door clicked shut, I remember thinking, where's their alcohol? And I knew they had hid it, but they like hid it in their closet upstairs. And so I scavenged through the house, and they hid it in their closet upstairs. And I actually was in a safe with a key, and I knew where they had hidden the key. I don't know. I think we have this like crazy brain, this X-ray vision for where it is. Like if there's a will, there is a way.
Yeah.
And so I found the alcohol. I like chugged half a fifth of vodka, which, and then more and more blacked out. And by the time my parents came home, I was completely stark raving mad, like really, really drunk, screaming at everybody, all of that. And I woke up in the morning, and my dad very much was like, you don't get to talk to the family anymore. You don't call me. You don't blink at me. Like you're cut off from funds. You're cut off, he was just cutting me off. I mean, it was true Al-Anon, graduate school for him. He was cutting his like beloved first daughter off. And I was so shaken by that, because he had always been there. I mean, I'm very close to my father. I was so shaken by that. And I didn't have any winter boots. And so my sister took me to the bus stop, and I was in flip-flops, and I had no boots. And it was the dead of winter in Breckenridge. And I was like, I can't do this life. I was basically like, this is so hard. And it clicked for me. Like, I will lose not just everything in the abstract, but I will lose the people I love today if I don't do something. And I was willing, and it was just like a second of willingness. And so I went back to California. I had a return ticket. So I went back to California and just threw myself into AA. And I did AA, but I also lived with people in recovery. I did everything they asked me to do. I got my eating disorder under control through Overeaters Anonymous and Eating Disorders Anonymous in Orange County. And I went to a really good psychiatrist. So there definitely was medication in my story. So I got on the right meds, and I went to a therapist. So I did a lot of talk therapy, a lot of CBT stuff. And that's it. It's kind of what Workit offers today without the packaging.
So how did that bring you to creating Workit?
So in my story, I have a lot of treatment centers. So I went to Renfrew, like a big yikes. And then I went to Sierra Tucson, and then I went to like 4 different detoxes. And then I ended up at this recovery place in Newport Beach. And so I had seen the insides of the best treatment in the world. And I put that in quotes, but gold standard treatment, right? I had been in for longer than a year. I had been in the finest institutions that don't even accept insurance, but like price tag back then was like $60,000. Today, maybe $2 million because of inflation. I don't know what it would be today, but they were very expensive. And I was left with like just this hollow pit of experience. Like what really got me what really got me into recovery wasn't any of that. It was really just this combination of great medication, great friends and community, and great therapy. It was really that, if you boiled everything away. And that's what I stayed sober on for 20 years. I've never relapsed past that when I found that special combination. So when I was in AA, and for a long time, I know I'm not supposed to talk about that at the level of press, radio, and film, so I'm breaking a tradition. But when I was in the rooms, I had a lot of sponsees, and I had a lot of people come to me and say, my daughter is drinking too much. What do I do? And I kept having to refer people to treatment centers because that was the only option. And nobody that I referred would either be able to pay or get in. If it was like a Medicaid sponsored treatment center, the wait lists were really long. It was just so inaccessible. On the flip side, I lived in the Bay Area. I was working with I was working a lot with this incubator, Rock Health, these companies that were doing these incredible things in healthcare. So I would be talking all day to people developing wearables that detected sweat and could anticipate the kind of medication you need to use. There's just, things like that, like these unbelievable cross-disciplinary these health innovations. And I thought, this is crazy. Like at night, I'm going to these grungy basements and as the only answer, and everybody's dying around me. And by day, I'm working on these really well-funded mechanisms and innovations and apps in other areas, in cancer and diabetes and these other acceptable moral high ground areas. And so that was really the impetus. It was like, how can I get all of that joy, but also all of that evidence and all of that science into a package, right? That's affordable and accessible to 90% more people, you know? And so that was the impetus. And I was in the Bay Area at the time, and it was the right time to do it too. It was in 2014 that we started putting together our team. 2015, and then 2016 we were funded. So it was a really good time to try that. And then we switched to medication and being kind of more of a full stack clinic later. But we were right place, right time in a lot of ways too, as far as the business world.
And so can you talk a little bit for people who aren't familiar with what the Workit platform does, especially like one of the reasons I think it's really cool is because so many people ask me like, okay, like your stuff worked for me for alcohol, but I still have this addiction, or I still have that addiction. I'm still struggling here, or, when people get stuck. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
People get stuck, and they get stuck with the comorbidities or the co-occurring things. I had a lot of that. Like, it's something that Lisa and I, my co-founder, and I were really serious about, is that, we're complex human beings, and it's really difficult to treat one thing in isolation. And we've taken it to a new place actually this past year, which is amazing. Like, now we can cure Hep C in 7 visits. We treat HIV, we treat anxiety and depression, and that bevy of disorders, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, like tons and tons of different things. So Workit, what we are today, is really a virtual clinic. So you can come into Workit, make an appointment. First, we call it the stabilization period. So you are assessed for comorbidities, meaning if you have OUD, if you have AUD, if you have depression, anxiety, we'll treat it all in one place. So we'll prescribe medication if that's appropriate. If not, we'll pass you on to behavioral health, to assess. We do a lot of science-based assessments on what you specifically need. And then from there, you enter, once you get that rhythm of prescribing and physical stabilization and working out what I think of as like the social determinants of health, like you're in a physically safe place, you have food security, basically all things stabilized. Then you go into a strengthened mode. So then you start learning about the higher education stuff, right? Like CBT concepts, we call them auto thoughts and antidotes, like black and white thinking would be on one side. Antidote to that would be color vision on the other side. So that's one framing. So basically looking at your thoughts in general, using CBT principles. And then from there, going into what we call like kind of a thriving onward mode. That's where the community kind of comes into play. Start going to groups a lot, and the groups are centered around these different life things, and like divorce, or how do I navigate this, or X, Y, and Z. And then that's it. And our goal is to get somebody from struggling to a place to where they want to go, but to a place of success, basically. So you can stop there too. Like, a lot of people come in, they say, I only want to be off pain meds, right? That's what I want. I don't want any of the other stuff. And that's a goal we can help them achieve. Or they can come in and say, I just want to have the best life ever. And that's a goal we can help them achieve as well. So, and that's it. We do it all through an app. You can log in, log out. You can jump in, jump out. We accept a lot of different insurance. So that's been definitely a labor of love. Insurance health plans are really, slow to adopt. But we really try in every single state. We're in 18 different states, but we try in the states that we're in to accept Medicaid and Medi-Cal in California, but Medicaid in every state. So right now, I think 70% of our patients are on Medicaid, which is a huge thing for a social impact company.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is so fascinating of what you've done, and I love it because it does, you treat all the things, right? And so that's when we first talked, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And you have medications, which I also think that there's a lot of people who might benefit from medications who, that's just not all that accessible to people. I remember when I first started, when was Workit founded?
2015.
2015. So very similar. This Naked Mind was published in 2015. And I feel like when that happened, when people wanted to go to get naltrexone or something like that, a lot of doctors just wouldn't even touch it or prescribe it, right? And so there was if someone wanted to try it, because I remember the documentary One Little Pill came out and I had Claudia on my podcast and she was talking about how it worked for her. And then we got this whole slew of emails of people wanting to try it out. And, I'm like, just whatever works, like, let's just fix it. Right. Like, who cares what it is, just like fix however it works for you. And I was like, talk to your doctor. And I got so many responses like, no, my doctor won't even touch this. And so it's really cool what you've done in making it so accessible. And it's interesting too, because I think you're a for-profit company and AA is a nonprofit, and then rehab centers are for-profit and ineffective wholly from from everything I've heard. And so you exist in this middle. Therapy is obviously for-profit, doctors are for-profit, hospitals are for-profit, all of these things, right? But have you gotten, I know for my organization, it's like there's so much pushback because you're not AA. And even though we do the alcohol experiment totally free, and even though like I'm so dedicated to making sure everything is accessible from a price point, which, as you pointed out, rehab is wildly inaccessible. I certainly get pushback.
Yeah, we get pushback. We've gotten pushback at every step. Now it's easier because it's more validated. I think the world is sort of saying, it can't be just AA and rehab. Like it just can't be, right? It can't be, AA is incredible for what it is, but it's pretty lawless. It just is. And it's definitely layman teaching layman. It's not a clinical environment and it's not a medical environment. And it never purported, I mean, it never wanted to be, in fairness. Like AA has never posited itself in the AA that I love, that I know and love. It's never posited itself there. But like in the medical treatment environment, you have these luxury rehab centers that sort of own the Google search results. They own the pathway. So even if you have mental health centers or community mental health, they're so drowned out by what we call the Florida shuffle. So if you Google, you'll just be sent to Florida, sent to Florida, sent to Florida. It's pretty crazy. I think the world hopefully is kind of awaking to this idea of, there are many doors, right, to what we call recovery, and there are as many different types of people in the world. That's how many options there should be. Like truly, 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 there's room for all of it. I think AA is just, speaking from an Alcoholics Anonymous perspective, I think that group specifically has worked so hard to carve out legitimacy in the world and worked so hard from the 1930s on to say alcoholics deserve to be treated not like criminals, but by people with this, what they call moral failing, but with people with this problem, that they deserve to be helped and they can get better and they can live in this big, colorful world. AA has worked so hard to carve out that space, that to be so defensive about holding that space steady, I think that's really what it is. I think it's saying, this is how I got sober. Don't take it away from me, because this was my life raft. This was my everything. And so I think there's a lot of fear about letting other things in. So that's my interpretation. And hopefully it's changing. Like a lot of people in Workit are in AA at the same time. Like unless your AA group is anti-medication, which a lot of them are, it's totally appropriate. And we're normalizing that. People could be in your program and our program and AA. I know I've been through many, many, many different programs, and they've all helped in some way or another.
Yeah, it's just all can be a step along the path and to getting the help you need. And, which is why I think it's so important to have these sorts of conversations and, like just really open up options for people, because it would be, delusionary to be like, well, my way is the only way that works. Or if, it's just not true. Like you said, it needs to be all the types for all the different types of people. And I think that's what's so beautiful and so important. So Robin, let me ask you the question that I always ask to wrap these things up. But if you were going to go back in time to Robin, who was finding the keys, it's funny, not funny, but got to find humor in it, but like had this, X-ray vision for where that alcohol was on your first day home, and then waking up the next morning and getting dropped off without your without winter boots in the wintertime. And you're just going to tell her how your life has turned out and where you are now. What would you tell her?
I would say, just go back to California. Like, please don't. I flew up to Minnesota after that, and I jumped on a train after that. I would say, please just like A to B. You don't have to go, A to Z. Like, you can just go straight there. It's accessible, it's available, it's waiting for you. This big, beautiful life. Like, you don't have, this pain is so optional, like suffering is optional. That's what I would say. Like, just go straight there. Get on the big highway and shoot over there.
I love that. Yeah. We don't have to keep waiting for that future version of ourselves. We can actually do something now. And
absolutely. Awesome. Yeah.
So
we don't have to keep like shooting off the highway. I actually, Bo, my partner, when we drive together, he has this funny thing. He's really creative, and he has this problem, which I diagnose as a serious problem. He thinks it's just part of driving, but he shoots off the highway. So I'll look up and we'll be in some random town. And he's like, I don't know how I got off the highway. I'm like, oh my God. So that's what I was doing. I kept shooting off the highway.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, this has just been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy. And where can people learn more about Workit if they are curious and want to look into?
I think go to our website, just www.workithealth.com.
Okay, perfect.
That's
awesome.
where we are. All right.
Thank you, Robin.
All right. Bye.
Have you tried the alcohol experiment? Okay, if not, drop everything and go to alcoholexperiment.com. This is a free 30-day challenge, and it's designed to interrupt your patterns and put you back in touch with that best version of you. You remember, it was that version of you that's living your most joyful life, that version that didn't need alcohol to relax or have a good time, the one that's able to have more fun than ever. Again, this is a totally free challenge, and it can change everything for you. So learn more and join me for a 100% free challenge at alcoholexperiment.com. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps me reach somebody who might need to hear this message today.